Welcome back in TFA Fam. It's your boy, Kevin Steele. You can find me on Twitter at FantasyRad13. Back again with another video. Today, we're going to be discussing Week 6 waiver wire ads. Let's just jump right into it. Now, let's go. All right, before we go ahead and get this thing started, be sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions, we will always answer them, whether it's trade, whether it's waiver ads, whether it's a start sit question. I don't care. One of us will answer it. That is a personal guarantee. I don't care whatever time it is, whatever day it is. If somebody's awake, we're going to answer your question. We're here for you guys. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. Let's start with the quarterback position, the streaming options. Now, let's just get right into it. The biggest injury of probably this entire weekend was Dak Prescott. It was a terrible injury. My hearts go out to that dude. And the dude just had a nasty ankle injury, dislocated ankle with also a compound fracture. So it also sounds like that it broke the skin, which there's the chance of infection there. I am not a doctor, so I'm not about to get in that, but his season is definitely over, which is a shame because he was absolutely balling this year. Despite the fact playing on a franchise tag and betting on himself, Cowboys didn't want to pay him the money he does. This is a scary thing. I don't know how this is going to affect him next year, but let's, for all you Dak Prescott guys, the people that roster him, we're going to have to figure something out. Obviously, he was somebody that you were just playing regardless because he was absolutely crushing this year. So let's just start it off with the quarterbacks and who we would be streaming. For me, it's Matt Stafford. If he's available, he's rostered in only 60% of leagues. I know some people may have dropped him because he was on bye this past week, but his schedule sets up absolutely like a dream. They get Jacksonville, which is a defense that you're not worried about. And then they play at Atlanta, Indy, at Minnesota, and their terrible secondary, Washington, at Carolina, and Houston. Like, this is one of the best schedules that you could possibly think of, heading out extended period of time. Somebody you can plug in, his bye week's out of the way. So if you're a Dak Prescott owner, or you also maybe you're struggling at quarterback, maybe you have Carson Wentz, or your quarterback's kind of an up and down, Matthew Stafford is available. I would be willing to spend a decent amount of fab to acquire him just because of how good that schedule is. You're not really worried about streaming him. Kenny Galladay's 100% healthy, TJ Hawkinson, Marvin Jones, DeAndre Swift in the passing game. So there's a lot to like here with this Lions offense. So if Stafford happens to be available, I would be looking to acquire him any way I can. For some other streaming targets, Kirk Cousins, they get Atlanta this week. Atlanta's defense is absolutely horrendous. They've allowed the most fantasy points to the position. Kirk Cousins played pretty well tonight. Threw for over 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have 3 turnovers, that late turnover, which I still think was a fumble regardless. He had 2 fumbles and an interception. But in a game against Atlanta, I think they can definitely, should be one that you can exploit. The only concern would be if they get up early. The Minnesota Vikings are a team that want to run the ball, and Kirk Cousins could end up with 25 attempts that game. So that would be the only concern with him. But other than that, it's a great matchup. Moving on, Andy Dalton is obviously going to be, taking over now for Dallas. I know it's not a sexy name, but, Andy Dalton does have some track record whenever he's been in good offenses that he's been able to be a pretty good quarterback. And, he went in this game 9 for 11, 111 yards, no touchdowns, obviously, but it was late in the game. He brought them down that last drive, hit Michael Gallup on 2 really nice throws. With this offense, with Amari Cooper, with Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, and Dalton Schultz, as well as Ezekiel Elliott, I think that he has some QB1 upside here. And so it's really going to be matchup dependent. And this week they get the Cardinals on Monday Night Football, which is a defense that I'm not afraid of. So, I think you can play Andy Dalton if you need to, and he's going to be 100% available in every single league. I wouldn't spend a great amount of fab. Like if I was a Dak owner, I think there's probably better options out there long term, like Kirk Cousins. Would be a guy that I would consider if Stafford wasn't available. Justin Herbert is somebody that I really like and has played really well so far this year. If you absolutely had to, I could see it, because Andy Dalton wouldn't surprise me if he finished from here this point out, finishes a QB1. It really wouldn't surprise me because of all the weapons they have, and this defense is not getting any better. Some other options, like I mentioned, if you're in a pinch, would be Ryan Tannehill against Houston week 6, 47% rostered. Justin Herbert 50%. Gardner Minshew. I do want to mention with him, we're going to be monitoring what happens with DJ Chark, because if DJ Chark is out, I would probably drop him down a little bit further, because we've seen him in the matchups without Chark, and he is just not the same guy. So we'll see on that. Daniel Jones and then Nick Foles rounds out the streaming options for this week. But like I said, for me, it's Matthew Stafford. He's a clear-cut you do whatever you can to acquire him. And then it's Kirk Cousins, Andy Dalton, and then the list goes on. So let's go ahead and jump over to the running back position. As fate always has it, I was just about getting ready to record this, and then I had to wait because I had to change everything up because Dalvin Cook went down with an injury. It was a groin injury. He left, went to the locker room. He came back and looked okay, and then he only played for one more snap, and then he kind of hobbled off the field, and he didn't play the rest of the game. He had his helmet on the rest of the time, but he never played. Some of that could be because Alexander Mattison played pretty well. He ended up with over 100 rushing yards and I believe 20 or 30 receiving yards in this game. So he played really well. He wasn't able to find the end zone, but Alexander Mattison didn't really miss a beat in relief of Dalvin Cook. It's going to be interesting to monitor this week because Dalvin Cook, what his status is going to be, because Minnesota goes on bye week 7 and they get Atlanta this week. So I could see them being cautious with Dalvin Cook. You don't want to injure him. He's somebody that has been injury plagued his entire career. So I would not be surprised if the Vikings sat Dalvin Cook. If he was and Alexander Madison's available, he's only rostered in 37% of leagues. I wouldn't blame you for going out and wanting to, put a decent amount of fab to acquire Alexander Mattison, but I wouldn't break the bank because I don't think this is a long-term thing. Like, this isn't something that I believe that Dalvin Cook is going to be out like 4 to 6 weeks or something. I think this was at most a 1-week injury, and then he's likely back week 8. So I wouldn't go crazy on Alexander Mattison. Now, if Chase Edmonds is available still, because he's only rostered in 44% of leagues, we said it last week, I've been pounding the table for Chase Edmonds. He's still only rostered in 44% of leagues, but today he had a really nice performance. 3 carries, 36 yards, which was a 29-yard touchdown. He also had 5 receptions on 6 targets for 56 yards. And he finished about 20 fantasy points in PPR format. He was out-touched by Kenyon Drake 18-8. However, it's probably almost a matter of time before he takes over this backfield. In the meantime, Edmonds remains a flex option. I think he has a high weekly floor, and against this Dallas defense, I think you can play him as a flex option again this week. He now has back-to-back double-digit fantasy performances. I think he had like 15 last week and 20 this week. So if for whatever reason, I know most of you are going to say Chase Edmonds is not available, and I know you have the people that are going to say, Chase Edmonds isn't available in my league, man. I wish I could play in your leagues. Clearly he is, because he's still available in 50% of leagues, okay? So if he is, add him. Now, the rest of this list is a little bit, Cam Akers, if he's available, I put him on this list because he's rostered just about that 50% or 60% mark. This is still a tough one because he only rushed 9 times for 61 yards, and the bulk of his production came on a 46-yard run in the fourth quarter, which shows some of his athleticism and what he's able to do. But the tough part is trusting him because Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown are still splitting the backfield touches in here, and so this is still a full-on committee. So I would not go crazy adding Cam Akers, but anytime a decent running back is on the waiver mark, on the waivers or available in free agency, I want to add them because he does have that upside. If something happens to Darrell Henderson or Malcolm Brown, I think there's a chance that he could take over. He is their 2nd-round pick. He's coming off injury with that rib injury, but I do believe that Cam Akers is still the most talented running back in this backfield. But for the time being, we're not going to be able to trust him. So if he is out there and he's not going to take a lot to acquire, I would put in a waiver claim for him or to acquire him just because I think that he does have some upside, but I wouldn't go crazy in terms of fab or anything like that, maybe 10 to 15% at the most because of where this backfield sits. Now, the rest of the list is guys that I believe that are much more the handcuffed here, right? The guys that, much like Alexander Mattison just found himself in, Dearness Johnson, he played okay today. He didn't get a ton of opportunities. He didn't see as much as he saw last week, but he had a nice run late in that game. Kareem Hunt was still the workhorse back. Zach Moss, we have yet to see. They play on Tuesday night, but he was dropped by a lot of people because of the fact that he missed a couple of weeks. But he's only rostered in 51% of leagues. Jamal Williams is still only rostered in 15%. I know he was on bye this last week, but he is a lot like, I guess, a Chase Edmonds type, right? Like, he's definitely not as talented as he is, but he's going to get opportunity because the Packers like to split up this backfield. So Jamal Williams is going to have a role, and he does have some standalone value here. They like to use him on 3rd downs, and he's going to get some goal line opportunities as well. So I like Jamal Williams, and he should be rostered in far more leagues. So if he's actually out there, he's somebody that you could actually plug in and play with these bye weeks coming, because now, like I said, bye weeks are actually here, not just with all the games that are postponed. So with bye weeks coming, like Jamal Williams, and now with having his bye out of the way, like Jamal Williams does make a lot of sense. The other guys are Tony Pollard. If Ezekiel Elliott goes down, Tony Pollard becomes a really good play. I think it hurts him a little bit with Dak Prescott going down because I don't think this offense is going to be as explosive. But even still, if Zeke went down, Tony Pollard would still be a really valuable add. Duke Johnson, David Johnson is always injury prone. So if something were to happen to him, and especially now that Bill O'Brien's gone, we could have some, maybe Duke Johnson gets a little bit more opportunity. And if he did, maybe they would actually make Duke Johnson the feature back here. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But he's only rostered in 29% of leagues. Brian Hill, 21%. Philip Lindsay, we're not going to see him this week, but he did get in a full practice this week. So if he's somehow available out there because people dropped him because he's been hurt, he's worth looking at. Now, in those deeper leagues, the guys who say, oh, those guys aren't available in my league, some of these guys are going to be available in your league. This is for teams that are in 12 to 16 team leagues. Anthony McFarland is certainly one we've talked about. I talked about him today. He continues to get opportunities. There for a while, like he was getting some run in this game today against the Eagles. But Anthony McFarland is a guy that I feel like that if something happened to James Conner, like it would be Benny Snell that would get the early down work, but Anthony McFarland would likely soak up all that pass catching work. And, he's looked explosive when given opportunities. So in deeper formats, I would want to roster Anthony McFarland. All right, let's go ahead and just jump over to wide receivers. This is really the kind of the cream of the crop this week is the wide receiver position. We saw a lot of really big performances this week by some wide receivers, most notably Chase Claypool. Claypool went absolutely nuclear today, 7 for 11, 110 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also rushed for a touchdown today, so he had 4 touchdowns. Went absolutely off. He's only rostered in 10% of fantasy leagues. Chase Claypool is a really interesting prospect because if you look at his profile, the dude is an absolute freak of nature. His combine was absolutely crazy. But if you look at his combine and what the numbers we have, he ran an 89th percentile 40-yard dash. He has a 92nd percentile burst score. I mean, the dude is an athletic freak, 6'4", 240 pounds. I know some of the people in Pittsburgh call him Mapletron, after Calvin Johnson, but the dude's been great so far. In limited opportunities, he's played really well, and this really could have been his coming out party in this game. Really, I mean, no Steelers receiver outside of Claypool saw more than 5 targets in this game because he was clearly the number 1 receiver in this game. And really, to me, Claypool should be rostered in every league right now, especially if Deontay Johnson, who left this game again with another injury this week. It's a back injury for him. Didn't play very much. I think he had 1 reception for -2 yards or something like that. But it was not good. But Chase Claypool, I think, certainly deserves to be added, especially with bye weeks coming up. So for a lot of these players. So Chase Claypool does make some sense, 10%. The other guy is Brandon Cook. It feels good for Brandon Cooks to finally go off. I actually talked about him this morning. I talked about him this morning on our game day show that he's somebody that people should really be looking at playing today because I felt like that now with Bill O'Brien gone, I felt like you were going to see Brandon Cooks much more involved in this offense, and boy, did we. He started the first play of the game, 36-yard catch. And then he ended up finishing the day with 8 of 12 targets for 161 yards and a touchdown against the Jaguars. He led the Texans with 12 targets and accounted for almost half of Deshaun Watson's total passing yards. This was a big, big rebound for him. I mean, he'd been held under 25 yards in 3 of the first 5 weeks. This next week they're going to be getting the Titans, but Brandon Cooks is back on fantasy radars. They traded for him over this offseason after they moved on from DeAndre Hopkins, but with Bill O'Brien gone, I think this offense could really take a step forward. And so I would expect this kind of output from Brandon Cooks moving forward. I don't know if he's going to see 12 targets every week, but I think 8 is probably a pretty solid floor for him, I think, on most weeks. So I do like Brandon Cooks, and I think he's back on fantasy radar. So if people dropped him, he's available in your league. He definitely deserves a waiver ad. The next one for me is T. Higgins. He wasn't fantastic today, but he did see another 8 targets for 62 yards against the Ravens. To be honest, I mean, this is a really good output considering the matchup he was playing. And Joe Burrow was running the entire time for his life, basically, because the Ravens put so much pressure on him. Their offensive line could do nothing. But right now, I mean, Higgins has drawn at least 6 targets in 4 straight games and has caught at least 4 passes in 3 straight games, and it's averaging 70 yards over his past 2 games. So there's a lot to like with T. Higgins. A.J. Green also left with a hamstring injury. I don't know what to make of A.J. Green. There's a part of me that thinks that he's doing whatever he can to get out of Cincinnati because he did not want to be there. They franchise tagged him. He was not happy about it, but he's not the type of player that's going to go come out in the media and start all this problems. So I don't know if he's trying to force his way out of Cincinnati, because I know there's a play that they threw an interception on, and he didn't even try for it. He just stood there as the ball went over his head. Like, I don't think AJ Green really wants to even be there. So if T. Higgins is available still in your leagues, rostered in 40% of leagues, he's worth an ad. The next one is Laviska Shenault. This dude is kind of like a jack of all trades. I remember talking about him a lot over the offseason, especially pre-draft whenever we were looking at him. And that's kind of how he was used in Colorado as well, as kind of a jack of all trades. So, today he caught 7 of 8 targets for 79 yards against the Texans. He was held out of the end zone once again this week, which would be the 4th straight week. But his role continues to grow behind DJ Chark. We're going to have to monitor what happens with DJ Chark, like I mentioned earlier. But right now, I mean, he looks like the clear-cut number 2 wide receiver, and they try to get him the ball in his hand in a number of different ways. So I like Laviska Shenault as another option, in 12-team leagues. I think he should be rostered, and he's rostered in 34% of leagues, so he's kind of widely available. So I like that. Moving on to some of these other wide receivers, Mecole Hardman, probably Demarcus Robinson could be talked about in tandem. Sammy Watkins left today with what looked to be a pretty serious hamstring injury. Surprise, surprise, a soft tissue injury for Sammy Watkins. But, the Chiefs lost today to the Raiders. But, moving forward, they get the Bills this upcoming week. And I'm not sure what Tre'Davious White's going to do in this game. I know that he's likely probably going to shadow or see a lot of Tyreek Hill. Right now, like, Mecole Hardman is hard to trust. I still think he's probably a boomer bust wide receiver 3 without Sammy Watkins in the lineup, because I don't know if they're going to give him that role. I don't think he's going to come right in like a lot of people are going to expect him to, and just take over this backfield, or take over the Sammy Watkins role. I actually think it could actually be Demarcus Robinson. Regardless of that, Mecole Hardman should still see more opportunities without Sammy Watkins on the field. We did see Byron Pringle sighting today once Sammy Watkins went out, but Mecole Hardman, they seem reluctant to really want to give him a ton of opportunities here. I think he only had 3 targets today. So, and this was a game that they trailed in the second half, a decent amount of that second half. So I do like Hardman, and I have him higher. I have him number 5 here, and because of the fact he's in the Chiefs offense, because the fact that we know that they'll try to get different ways to get the ball in his hands. And I do think that he should see an uptick in opportunities, regardless of the fact that if I think Demarcus Robinson takes over the Sammy Watkins role. So, but I do think if you're in a deeper format, like a 14, 16-team league, or even if you're in a really deep 12-team league with deep rosters, and a lot of these guys are still rostered in leagues, Demarcus Robinson is not a bad ad, because I think that he's somebody that is going to get opportunities. And depending on matchup, like we saw last year, that Robinson is somebody that is one of Patrick Mahomes' favorite targets. So I don't hate adding Demarcus Robinson. So let's move on, keep this going so we can get this thing wrapped up. Henry Ruggs, rostered in 44% of league, super boomer bust. I think today, he had 3 targets in this game. He had 2 receptions for 110 yards. Just a crazy game. I mean, one of them was a 74-yard reception. So, Henry Ruggs, big time boomer bust. I wouldn't go out and get crazy with him, but he does have some upside, and hopefully they try to get him the ball more in his hands, because he is super explosive, and I think he's more than just a deep threat. So Christian Kirk, it was good to see him kind of get back involved today, or these last couple of weeks. He started to become more involved in the offense, but today he caught 5-7 targets for 78 yards and a win over the Jets. He's clearly the team's number 2 wide receiver ahead of Isabella and Fitzgerald. But right now, I think that he's probably a volatile I think he's like a wide receiver 4, a decent flex play depending on matchup. Now, this next week against Dallas, you can fire up all your Christian Kirk, and if he's available, he's somebody that I would definitely look to add for this week against Dallas, because Christian Kirk and DeAndre Hopkins are going to destroy this Dallas secondary. So I'm all about that live. Travis Fulgham is such a hard guy to talk, because I don't really know what to expect from him, because I don't think anybody saw this kind of production. But to be honest with you, he wasn't bad last week. Last week he had 57 yards and a touchdown against the 49ers. This week against Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh has one of the best secondaries in all of football, and he got 10 of 13 targets for 152 yards and a touchdown. And it's funny, because if you go look at playerprofiler.com, his best comparable is actually Michael Gallup. So do I think he's as good as Michael Gallup? Absolutely not. But right now, that they're just missing all these targets and all these options right now. Deshaun Jackson missed another week. They still don't have Jalen Reagor, who's likely going to be back week 7. They don't have Alshon Jeffrey yet, even though he started to come back in practice. Like, they have nobody to throw the ball to. And let's talk about Zach Ertz. Like, Zach Ertz looks like a dad. I mean, like, the dude looks not very good. It looks like he's out there running in mud. So can you add Travis Fulgham? Yeah. Would I go crazy? No. Do I think that he is going to put up this kind of production on a weekly basis? No. Had so many injuries. I think he's somebody that you could definitely add and probably play as a flex option, at least for the next couple of weeks. Now, they do get a tough matchup against Baltimore, but we just saw this week that how bad, I would put, Pittsburgh's defense up against Baltimore's, and I don't think it's crazy. So I think you can add Travis Fulgham. Now, if Cole Beasley's available, like I said, they get the Chiefs next Monday at 4:00, which is ridiculous, but that's what they've flexed that game to. It is on Monday at 4:00. Cole Beasley, 29% rostered. If he's out there in PPR formats, I think he makes some sense. I already talked about Demarcus Robinson. Keelan Cole has a decent floor, but not a high ceiling. I think his best game is like 10 or 11 fantasy points. But he does have, I think, 3 touchdowns now on the season. He scored another one this week against Houston. Golden Tate, again, another guy like Keelan Cole. Tim Patrick, their game got moved, but now they're going to be playing New England once again because the game got moved to this next week. And I don't love that matchup because more than likely I would assume that Stephon Gilmore would be back for that game, and that's likely who he would see. So that's not a great matchup. Darnell Mooney is super interesting because he really does look like their number 2 wide receiver there in Chicago. And on certain matchups, Darnell Mooney could actually make some sense. Jalen Reagor, I have him on here. I probably would have him higher. He's expected to be back week 7. So we really have this 1 week. So if you have a roster spot open and you kind of need a wide receiver, I think Jalen Reagor is somebody that I would definitely be adding to my bench. I think it's kind of a super interesting, into the bench add. And especially if you have IR spots and you're not filling them, I would pick him up and add him to IR because he's still pretty widely available. I think he's only rostered in like 15% of leagues. Zach Pascal, James Washington, both of those guys are just depth, possible flex options if you needed it. Alshon Jeffrey, I put him on there just in the case that he may return. And then Antonio Brown, I put him on there. He's suspended the first 8 weeks. We're getting closer to that threshold. I do think a team signs him. He is somebody that worked out all offseason. I would not be surprised if a team that needs a wide receiver, Eagles, that really needed a wide receiver, added him and looking for a playoff run. Like, I would not be surprised if a team brings him on. I know people are going to roll their eyes at it, but listen, the NFL does not care about what these guys do off the field. All they're going to care about is what he can do. And if you can sign Antonio Brown for the last 8 games of the season to probably a vet minimum contract, you're going to do it. We saw last year. I definitely think the guy still probably has something left in the tank, and he probably has something to prove. So if you can add Antonio Brown, if you haven't been hit with a bunch of injuries and you have the room on your bench and you just have somebody that's chilling there that you could drop, it's not a bad idea to add Antonio Brown and see what happens, because I do think somebody adds him. So let's just, before we hurry up and try to wrap this thing up, let's just jump over to tight ends. Again, tight end is super ugly. There's not a lot of great options. It's Eric Ebron, Austin Hooper, Jimmy Graham, Gerald Everett, and Darren Fells. Darren Fells is actually a guy that I called out this morning as a decent play because Jordan Akins was out. If he remains out, I think Darren Fells is a decent play because Deshaun Watson does look for his tight ends. Now, Eric Ebron, they get Cleveland this upcoming week. Cleveland is terrible against tight ends, so I don't mind that play, 53% rostered. So if he's out there and Deontay Johnson looks like he could be out, I think Eric Ebron does make some sense. Austin Hooper is continuing to get more and more involved in this offense, despite the fact that David Njoku actually returned and was actually back this week. He still was pretty decent this week, especially for a tight end. Jimmy Graham, I believe he has double-digit fantasy points in 3 of the 5 weeks. It's at least 2, but 3 of the 5 weeks this season. He's rostered in 40% of leagues. I don't love it. Again, he's somebody that I would want to be on more of a streaming option. I don't think it's something that I would look at as a long-term option, but it's something short-term. Gerald Everett, we've been talking about Gerald Everett for a while now around these parts, and I know a lot of people like Tyler Higbee heading the season, but I always said that you should really monitor Gerald Everett because Gerald Everett is truly the pass-catching tight end in this backfield between him and Tyler Higbee. He is much more athletic. He is a move tight end much in the same way that Evan Ingram is. Very athletic tight end. So would not surprise me if Gerald Everett continues this path. He had 4 receptions for 80 yards today. We saw last year before he went down with injury, like he was on pace to be a tight end 1 until he got hurt. So I like Gerald Everett. And if you're somebody that is desperate for a tight end, 1% rostered, He's not widely available. So Gerald Everett's not a bad option. And then we already talked about Darren Fells. So that pretty much wraps it up. So just to kind of put a bow on this thing really quickly so I could finish this thing up, it's Alexander Mattison if you need a running back. It's Chase Edmonds if he happens to be out there. I wouldn't get crazy with Cam Akers, but if he's out there, you can do it. That would be it at running back. Now, if we get some sort of late breaking news, some injury on these next 2 days, we'll talk about it, and I'll probably create some other video for this. But in the meantime, I don't think there's a reason to get crazy. At wide receiver, I definitely think that the guys that we kind of talked about when we went through Chase Claypool, it should be returned in all leagues right now. I mean, the dude is a monster, and he looks like he has a really good rapport right now with Big Ben. So, and with Deontay Johnson continually getting hurt, and really Juju Smith-Schuster just kind of chilling out in the background. I mean, Chase Claypool looks to be somebody who could end up finishing this year as kind of like a wide receiver 2 the rest of the season. Brandon Cooks definitely should be rostered in more leagues, especially after this big breakout performance. T. Higgins continues to impress. Laviska Shenault would be the guys that I would really want to spend some waiver money on, and probably Christian Kirk. And then past that, Travis Fulgham, I wouldn't get crazy with it if he's out there. If you're absolutely desperate for a wide receiver, you could do it. But I don't think this is something that I would look to continue. So with that being said, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for future content. I really appreciate it. And like I said, if anything else happens, and we get any breaking news of an injury tomorrow, we'll create another standalone video to kind of touch on that. And until then, I will see you guys again on Wednesday when we go live to do some start sit stuff, and along with some trade questions, whatever else you guys have. Until then, have a good rest of the week, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Peace.